3, 2, 1. What's going on, everyone? You are watching another episode of the Unnamed Indie Comic Show, starring Skip and his sidekick Ash. Thank you for being here. I love seeing you guys. I love getting together with my boy Skip to talk about indie books. Skip, how are you today?
Oh man, it's that Monday where we all get together and talk about indie comics. I feel great, man. I always look forward to this day, so I'm excited. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. This is my favorite YouTube / podcasty type of thing that I get to do every week, and it really heightens the experience of the books that I read that are involved in this show. As I say many times over and over again, one of the best things about the hobby is sharing the hobby with other people who understand your experience and have your level of enthusiasm. In this show, I mean, I could read these books by myself in a basement somewhere and I would still love them, but being able to do so publicly with other people and get together with someone like yourself and just geek out over these books makes the experience of actually reading them even more exciting.
I agree, man. I agree. That's why I'm so happy we get together, and especially with our people in the chat. For everybody that isn't able to join us live, we have some amazing people in the chat: Christopher Barker, Tehillim29, our buddy Lord. So many people and more to come. So come and be a part of it, as we always like to put segments in the show where we get to talk to you guys, and you guys get to talk back and let us know how you feel about these books that we're all sharing together as well.
Yeah, by all means, if you guys have comments about the specific book we're talking about, whether it's theory crafting, whether it's something you noticed that you maybe think we missed, or just something that particularly moved you about the book. You read a certain page, you're like, oh man, this particular scene was righteous. Throw that up. And, as one of us is talking, generally the other person's looking at chat, and, we love to be able to insert those comments, into the show too. It's not just about us talking at you, it's talking with you. That's like how we get to think of it. But if we do miss a comment of yours, please understand it can be tough trying to focus on our notes and doing the show and reading things. So, but we definitely want to get your guys' opinions and thoughts in as much as possible. So tonight, the comic we have featured on the show is one of our regulars. It is a book, Decorum, that Skip and I both love. It is by Jonathan Hickman, and it is I'm not sure how I would describe this. It's a hard sci-fi, heavily philosophical, I don't want to say existential. It's not really that, but it's... What would you categorize this book as, Skip? I'm kind of at a loss.
I'm not far behind you. This is a book unlike one that I've ever read before, but there are a lot of facets to it, from sci-fi to things being a story about family and the importance of family, as well as unforeseen opportunities appearing, and maybe not always feeling like you're the right candidate, but at the same time, believing in yourself and knowing that you can step up, especially, when your back's against the wall, as well as some very esoteric and very far-reaching ideas and commands. It's almost a bit of a heist as well, in a galactic sense. So it's a lot of things. And what's interesting about tonight is we really start to see some things come together. And I'm excited to talk to you about those things.
We are seeing some things come together. I'm telling you what, this was the first issue that I read. Well, this issue, when I read it, and as I'm going through East of West, which is another book we'll be talking later in the show, also by Hickman, I started seeing some parallels. Now, I'm kind of a Hickman novice and, or newbie. I haven't read many of his books. I know some people watching the show, like yourself, and some others, like Jimmy, if he's out there, like read all these books, and I always hear like, "Oh, Ash, man, when you got to understand, Hickman does this and he does that," and I'm like, "Well, I will eventually when I get to his books, I'll get." But I only read a few things of his, and reading now, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I'm starting to see some parallels in this book with East of West."
Mm-hmm.
Are you? Am I wrong on that, or is this something that you're sensing?
You're keying in on it, my friend.
Okay.
I was happy to hear you even start to say that, because I feel like within his indie work, it's the easiest to see those parallels, and they're especially with the two iterations of what we read, like issue number 6, along with East of West Volume 4, which we'll be discussing later. There was definitely an opportunity for those parallels to start to present themselves.
Yeah. And also, kind of coincidentally, uh, for me, and this particular book and the particular volume of East of West we'll be getting to later, Volume 4, I felt like they both turned a corner. Like, I feel like the storyline kind of hooked, and it was like, okay, we got through the introductions. Now we're gonna do the hook of where we're going, and I feel like East of West had a certain scene where it does that, and then this particular book, I feel like, oh, this is what Decorum is gonna sort of be about now. Maybe, I don't know. Hickman might be throwing me a curveball, but that's at least that's how I feel as I'm reading it.
I'm right there with you.
Cool, cool, cool. All right, well, let's go ahead and get to our first book of the evening, Decorum number 6. For those of you who may not have been following every episode of the show, one of the things our show is about is a podcast format show hosted primarily over YouTube, and it is a show celebrating indie comics. It's not a review show. We're not here to, critique it and get down what makes it good, what makes it bad, things like that. We're not reviewing it all. These are books that we just love, and we are here to advocate them, and we're fans of the books. We're absolutely biased, right? So if you're a person who's like, well, you're not addressing this or that, it's like, well, you kind of come into the wrong place. It's like going to a Star Trek convention and expecting people to be critical of Star Trek. This show features two kind of formats. We got new books that we're into that are currently coming out on the shelves month after month. One of those books is Decorum. Another one is Firepower. And then there may be a third book being added to that. Stay tuned. And then there's the second half of the show is trying to kind of delve into books that have, I don't know, obtained some sort of legitimacy in the back issue form through the trades. Books that you shouldn't skip over just because they're not current. The runs have ended. They've proven themselves, and maybe, it's not as fun reading new, older books because everyone else has already read them. You're late to the program. Well, not here. Here you get to come in, read these books in real time. Every 2 weeks we go through a new volume. Then you get to come to the show. And like me, I'm reading these in real time. I have not read past Volume 4 of East of West. I have no idea where it's going. So you're not going to get spoiled. If you're in the same boat, we're going to get to experience like, wow, where's this going together? We're going to theory craft together and share that as if the book was new. Decorum. Decorum. Skip, why don't you introduce this book to us?
Absolutely. Most of you have likely been reading along with us. For those of you who haven't, as we said, this is a very interesting book. We have a protagonist named Niha who has a family who is basically in this kind of cryostasis because of some sort of disease that had been going around. And she does odd jobs to help her family. Well, by chance, she was doing a courier job, came across an assassin, actually ended up delivering the weapon to the assassin. And through that, the assassin had actually recruited her into the sisterhood of assassins, the Assassins Guild. And then on the flip side, we have a whole nother story, a galactic story, where you have a set of people chasing this egg and a set of people trying to keep this egg from them. And what it is believed is that the egg, inside of the egg, will have the Messiah of the universe that can ultimately save it, because it is in a very, very bad state between corporate corporatocracy and the elements and class of people and everything. And it seems like it was a very much a cat and mouse game, up until finally the last group of people were able to take the egg far enough away. It was five women who kind of had a sisterhood as well. They reduced themselves down to one, and one of them is kind of harnessing, almost like a hen sitting on the egg, trying to have it hatch. And then and Niha, she was in the guild, and she was having her trials, going back and forth, deciding if she could hack it or not. Could she kill for money? Could she not kill? She passed all those tests, and then we get to this issue right here, where those two separate storylines don't stay. They're not playing a hide and seek from each other as much in this issue, Ash.
Yeah, it's yeah, they definitely aren't, and there's some big reveals to who the characters are that are sort of against the sisterhood and chasing the egg, if you will. Which I don't want to keep bringing up east to west, but I was like, oh my gosh, it's the same. But yeah, continue.
Well, I mean, that pretty much brings us here. I mean, ultimately, in this issue, we come to find that the group that was chasing for the egg, the main person who has been sent to chase it, supposedly by God, or from what we know, which obviously there had been no personification. It is this big, radiant, almost like a sun type of thing, speaking down to the small, tiny little being, and that being's name is Chiro Chiro Chi. Well, Chiro Chiro Chi again failed, had kind of continuously, made known, hey, I'm an instrument of failure. Doesn't matter what I do, I always fail. I go, I chase the egg, it eludes me, and I fail. I am not the right tool for this. And the god of the story basically tells Chiro Chi, oh, you're telling me this because you want to die, you want to perish, don't you? You want the reward of the release into nothingness. And Rochi agreed and says, yes, I do. But God said, no, but there will be one more chance for you. You're not the right tool for this, so go and find me the right tool to get the egg. And Chiro Chi is sent off to find who would be the best tool to procure the egg and bring it back to what that side believes is the rightful place for the egg to be, and to be raised into, what they want it to be.
Yeah, let's. I mean, I'll cut in right here. I thought this was a really cool transition. I have on the screen the big galactic cosmic moment where Chiro. I'm just going to call him Chiro for short. Chiro is talking to his maker, his god thing, which looks a little similar to something he's doing over in X-Men, but we won't really talk about that right now. But it looks like it could be some AI entity thing. And sure enough, we do find out right away in this book, or pretty early on in the book, that at least from the perception of other characters, Chiro and his kind are robots. They refer to them as robots, which was one of the big eye openers to me, because I was always just calling them like these monolith men or something, because they kind of look like, they remind me of the monolith in 2001. They're just all these black, weird. I didn't know what they were, but if they're robots and this big godlike sphere thing that's talking to them is also some sort of, gigantic alien, or some artificial intelligence. I don't know. That hints at a lot for me. But anyways, the scene that I liked is when he says, perhaps you are wrong. It's, the wrong tool for the job. So your new job is to find something better suited for my needs. To which it cuts over, and the first thing we see is Niha sitting on this little, I don't know even know what she's sitting on. At first I thought it was a cliff, but, and that's a very much a storytelling cue to be like, oh, the first thing you see when the mentioned. Now, this also could be a red herring, but I don't think it is where the story is going. Um, Next, we see a giant, massive ship appear over the sisterhood, and one thing that strikes me about this book, Skip,
Hmm.
are you a manga reader at all?
Yeah, yes, I
You
am
read some
reading through
manga from time
Akira
to time?
right now.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Hmm.
This book feels heavily influenced, not necessarily the story, but the style of the medium feels
Hmm.
heavily influenced of manga, where you have these really great, crisp, painted scenes, and then the art kind of devolves. It feels like, and it can throw you off
Hmm.
if you're not used to it. But manga is very much known for this. A lot of creators will do like a couple of pages in color, and the art's a lot more detailed, and then they just sort of, as they get into the story, it's looser and not quite as much. And um, I'm not 100% certain why that is. My guess is because these guys work under extreme tight deadlines, and they don't have all the time in the world to, if they focus on detail, then they might be like Gary Frank and give us one issue every 4 months. Um, so it feels like that.
Hmm.
But a lot of, like, we were talking this before in his East of West with Nick Dragotta doing the art. That one feels less manga influenced, but even still having some of those, the way the action lines are and the way they approach, framing scenes. I really get that
Yeah.
feel here.
Hmm.
Um, so, did you want to continue with the describing the book? I kind of interrupted you, but or do you want me to?
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we go back to Niha, and she's out there with the sisterhood in that city. Kind of, as you were showing, had that big old head, and had that big old splash page of kind of showing that the ship of the robots coming in, Chiro's people, and sure enough, that's where Chiro found that with all of his access to all of that information. He finds that sisterhood of assassins as the place to find the best weapons to track down and procure the egg. So they show up, and the beings come down. There it is inferred that there was a little bit of conversation before they arrived, at least some contact with Ma, who is seems to be like kind of like the president of the sisterhood, and then of course Madame Morley, who is Niha's, let's say, tutor, so to speak, and seems like she's like the vice president of the sisterhood. So they were in the know before they arrived. There was no alarm. Ma was telling Madame Morley not to mess up the money, but ultimately they have a discussion. The Chiros people and the sisterhood, and you know they they come to an agreement on the price of the cost of the service, which was a planet-sized diamond. I don't see how anybody would turn that down. And there was some stipulations. Planet-sized diamond if they bring the egg back unharmed and the contents in it alive. One third of a planet-sized diamond if they bring it back dead, because they did bring up the sisterhood brought up the terms. Well, what if we can't just? What if it won't come back with us? And they said, okay, we'll kill it, and then we'll give you one third of the planet-sized diamond. So they make their agreement. There we go. They pretty much inform the rest of the sisterhood, all of the newer students and the people that have been established there, like, hey, we got a new job. This is what we're going to be doing. If you want to make something of yourselves, if you really want to shine, this is your opportunity, because this could make them all rich. So she's really putting them on their P's and the Q's. Niha can't sleep. she she's settling into her gig, but she's still a little uneasy about the assassin business. So she
Yeah, this.
goes and she. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say this is where I said earlier I was talking about how the book feels like it does its hook,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a page here which I have up on the screen on the right, and Ma is basically telling all the other sisters, about just everyone, we're gonna try to do this, and it's more money than you can imagine, blah blah blah. She says it's enough for you to buy your way out of your worst sin, enough for you to get whatever it is that you want. And if you're looking at the screen right now on the right, you can see like Niha's just like on her phone type thing. She's not really paying attention. And then it's like enough for you to get what you want, and she like perks up, like what? And then finally it says enough for you to sleep at night. And this was like the hook. You're like, okay, I get it. Like now finally we have a motive for the main character. I mean, we always kind of did. She kind of joined the sisterhood because she's poor and she's got these massive debts. Her family has got this disease and they're in cryo, and she wants to save them, and she can't afford, so she's kind of just doing this for the money. And now this is like more money than you can imagine, and you see that she's our main protagonist, I feel, and now she's got a real purpose, like not just a job to pay the bills. She's got to find a way to get this done. Would you agree, or do you have a different take?
Oh no, that's completely it. That is exactly how I felt like it was set up. Yeah, down to the art and itself, and her kind of perking up once, like you said, oh, enough money for you to sleep. Because obviously, even from this, the next scene, she's going and she's knocking on Madame Morley's door because she can't sleep, and she wants to go and just kind of get on the same page with her, like, hey, we're teaming up, right? Here's the splits, here's the cuts, we can do 60-40, blah blah blah. And Madame Morley lets her know this is a big job and there's a lot of ground to cover, and this time around we're actually not going to be teamed up. And
And
you see,
real quick before you
mhm,
go, I just wanted, there was a really fun moment that I really like what
mm,
Hickman does with these two characters. It's really
uh-huh,
reminds me similarly of some techniques that buddy cop stories do, where Madame Morley is the total straight lace person, and then you have the one character who's not so serious or maybe a little bit crazy or somehow different that throws chaos. And I just really enjoyed, I don't know why, but this scene where she's knocking on the door, she's not really knocking. She's using, it's a futuristic thing. She hits a button. But Morley kind of criticizes her about, you're the one knocking in the middle of the night. and she kind of pauses and says, I didn't knock, I used the buzzer. And then there's a couple of beats of just silence where she's sitting in the dark. And she's like, please let me in, and finally like opens up. And I love how this Niha character constantly is like getting under the skin of Madame Morley, because Madame Morley is like so perfect and organized and neatly and
prim
well
and proper.
mannered, prim and
Hmm.
proper. And you can tell that she has obviously an affinity for Niha. I don't know if she looks at her like a daughter. She's got some, they have a bond, but it's one of those little things. We sometimes criticize other books for like making all the characters kind of just sound the same, interchangeable. I really enjoy reading a book where I can feel the characterization in the little moments of dialogue. And in a book like this, which is so wrapped up in this huge, complex plot and philosophical ideas, and your brain is like kind of like blowing up in your head, and you're like, I don't understand. And then you get like, it's still got fun characterization. That's kind of what I wanted to say. It's not a dry, just boring clinical read. Sorry.
Oh no, I fully agree. I think that's something Hickman does especially well, like in his indie stuff. I feel like he does a good job of it too in the Marvel stuff, but obviously over on that side of things, it, I don't, for whatever reason, it doesn't shine through as well from his older stuff to his newer stuff. But I do feel like he does a better job than most, especially most modern writers. Like the dynamics between the people matter. And it matters for the tensions of the scene. It matters for building trust and establishing relationships. And overall, it's fairly rare that you get into a Hickman book and his characters just sound the same. Even if you don't, even if people don't always enjoy the scenarios that you find the characters in, and maybe don't even enjoy the characterization itself, he always makes sure to give the characters distinct voices.
Yeah, for sure. And
A-
just this one in
and it shined
particular,
through there.
this one
Hmm.
in particular, I just wanted to mention that because on the surface, if you're just looking at these panels and you're not really reading the book and you're hearing us talk to what it's about, it can sound like it's just this dry, clinical, stale piece of artsy sci-fi. And in some ways it is, right? This is going to appeal to the 2001 crowd. It's going to appeal to the people that want to stretch their minds with the not just the Matrix but the sequels too. Like, but it also is very human, is what I'm trying to say. So don't, if you're a person who's like, oh, I'm not sure about this book, no, it's got it all, and that's why Skip and I are excited about it.
I fully agree. They do establish, or at least Madame Morley establishes with Neha, that they won't be able to be together on it. And to what Ash says, that there is a bond that has been, established with them. And she breaks the news to her gently, as if she didn't want it to be the case. I think there's even a line there where she kind of makes mention of it in the book. Like let's assume that I did want it to be different, but this is the reality of the world that we live in. She kind of let her know that. To kind of cap off this scene, Ash, this is the part that kind of stuck out to me a little bit more. Like in hindsight, I don't think it sticks out more overall, but it caught me a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
Is how when Neha was finally going to leave, and she was leaving, and she was going to walk out, and I think we got some affirmation with that. Madame Morley was like, "Hey, you came here for something. What was it?" And Neha turns to her and says, "Oh, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter."
Yeah, no, I agree with
Obviously, it
you.
matters.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought this was a really important scene at these three panels on the lower right here. Because, she came in the middle of the night and she's like, I need to talk to you. And then they end up talking about something else because Neha walks in and is like, whoa, what's going on? And when she finds out she's going to be all alone, she's just like, oh, it's no matter. And I think Neha is starting to grow and look at Madame Morley perhaps either as somewhat of a mother figure or at least a big sister figure. She's not really ready to spread her wings yet on her own, but she's kind of being pushed out of the nest. Is that Does that sound like I'm on the right track?
Absolutely. There is that element there. We see it. It's quite apparent that Madame Morley has more faith in Neha's abilities than Neha does. Madame Morley has always seen something in Neha. I would even go as far as to say Madame Morley sees a bit of herself in Neha.
Yeah.
And knowing that, and knowing her own journey as she's been through it, she has that faith in Neha that Neha doesn't currently have in herself, and also that Madame Morley may not have had in herself when she was at the level, at the start, like Neha did. So I think there is a lot. There's dividends being paid in that invest that emotional investment. And I think those things not only heighten, but I think they are enriched in a way that I did not see coming as
Right.
we continue through the rest of this book. And to point something out, additionally, I think this is going to come up bigger later. I mentioned how Neha was talking about, hey, we'll be a team, we'll split it 60-40. And then when she wasn't getting that answer that will be a team, she kept pressing, hey, 70-30. But if I throw up in those shoes again, you're buying me some new shoes. I think it's very interesting how the split, the whole fact about splits kept coming up, and in a comical way it was changing. But I think that's a little foreshadowing that was being painted.
I agree. And Epidoxa in the chat says, look at these pages. They could just be talking heads, but they're very much not. So much expression and action in the scenes. And I very much agree. We see a lot as a very common modern trope in comics is to do the square boxes and a head looking at the camera. saying something. But here it's a scene, and you can feel if you know if you're just now being introduced in the book on these pages, it's not going to have as much resonance for you. But if you've been following along on all the previous 5 issues, you've grown with these characters and you've seen their relationship form, and it feels very natural. And there's true chemistry here, and you feel like I said, I really feel like Niha looks up at Madame Morley. I'm not quite sure if it's a mother figure or a big sister, maybe more big sister. And I also get a sense that Madame Morley looks at Niha. You know, she's kind of this unkempt, wild girl. You know, but I think Madame Morley might feel a little bit trapped. You know, she's all in the manners. That's her whole thing, and you know, with the way society is, and politeness, and how you have to behave in certain ways. And I think she's trying to instill that in Niha because she believes it, but she's also a little bit trapped by it. And Niha is such a free spirit that I think Madame Morley admires that, maybe slightly envious of it too. I don't know. But you get all of that without any exposition telling you that that's the case. You just get to read the book and feel it through their behavior to one another, and it really evolves and helps build your connection to these characters. Which, again, part of the reason we do this show is because these are the books that just hit us so hard. There's so many comics out there, and you know, all of them are going to have their fans. But I think that there's some out there that are really deserving your attention, and hopefully we can get some more fans of this book. And for the people who are fans, you found some like-minded brothers and out there to be like, yo, we get it too. Isn't this awesome? So yeah, please go on.
Absolutely. I want to double back on something. It's something that I had kind of discussed with you on and off the show, and I do it for all of my notes on East to West, but I had kind of forgotten to do it in this book. I think because chapters didn't become a thing in Decorum until later on in the issue. So he does have some chapter markers inside of the books. I want to go back and I want to kind of just put a focus on it for less than 60 seconds. The beginning of this book, the chapter of it, it's called Work Less, Make More. When you stop to think about it, the titles are doing heavier lifting than maybe we would give them credit for, because that's an interesting theme of it. That was an opportunity being presenting itself through Chiro and the robots for the sisterhood to do one big gig to where they wouldn't have to do any more at all. Work less, make more. It was also interesting that after that part was done, the next chapter that we just finished discussing with that very dense scene was chapter 14, Pack Your Bags for a One-Way Trip. Now, that I think that's a little telling, especially with some of the foreshadowing Ash and I just finished talking about. And now as we roll over to the next section that we're going to talk about, this one is called chapter 15, You Can't Go Home Again. And actually, that's where it takes us. It takes them back to their home planet. The name of the planet, we have it up here for reference. Oh, no, we don't. Actually, they didn't put it on there. They were just talking about the different parts of the planet. But this is where they first met. They first met on the home planet that they shared. Madame Morley was doing a job. Niha was doing a different job. And this is where they ran into each other. Things come back into a head because there were some ramifications for Madame Morley performing that job. She went in there. Niha was a courier for a whole different thing, ended up delivering a briefcase or some sort of high-tech case to Madame Morley. Inside of it was her weapon, which was one of the coolest weapons I'd ever seen. And she put everybody down in there, and then ultimately she killed, well, not everybody. She killed a lot of people, but she killed her main target, which was the big crime boss. There was people there that worked for the crime boss that saw that, and they got away. And they've popped up a few other times in the book, kind of showing that they're going to get together and try to give Madame Morley, and especially Niha, her comeuppance, because they think that Niha was intentionally involved with what happened to their boss, because Niha did some odd jobs for their boss before that happened, and she was there at the time. So they get back to the planet. Um, Neha one more time tells her, okay, I'll go 80-20, but that's as good as it gets. And Morley, just lets her know, hey, good luck to you, Neha. And they go their separate ways. Neha goes to visit her family that's in cryostasis. Again, just showing that that's her ultimate goal. With this money, the reason that she could sleep again is because she can get her family out of cryo, get them healed up, and live happily ever after eating ramen noodles at her favorite place, like issue number one. But what else? We knew that part. What else is interesting is we did see some of Madame Morley's home life, and I think it starts to go into that angle that Ash was talking about. But this is where their stories kind of bring them closer together in a way that, like I said, I didn't see coming. Madame Morley goes home. She goes to see her husband, Mr. Morley, and she says, "You look well, Mr. Morley." And he says, "Appearance, my dear, can be deceiving. I'm afraid this stately exterior hides a deep internal rot." And they sit down. And she's like, "Okay, that's ominous. We got to talk about this. What's going on?" Naturally, I think of some. Did you think of some sort of terminal disease, Ash, when you first heard that?
A little bit. I have to say, this particular section of the book with Mr. Morley, I don't want to say it was confusing. It wasn't said it was confusing, but it seemed to elude my understanding. Like, I read it and I was like, okay, I feel like there's more to it. Because I one thing I'm learning with Hickman as I'm reading, he doesn't tend to write nonsense. Like, just, I got to fill a page with to get my page count up. Here's the things that he puts in there, especially in this kind of manner when he actually writes a new scene. He may stretch scenes on longer than they need to go sometimes in other books, but when he does like a specific side scene like this, where this has nothing, it's not part of what was been going on, that there's an importance. And then he also puts a white page right after it, the dreams of Master Morley. And so you read a little bit of a text passage from his dream, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. I did walk away kind of scratching my head.
Okay, so for that part, I let's cap that part for a second because I want to bring that part back when we get to our theory section here in a few minutes,
Okay.
and we're only minutes away from that part. Overall, I'll cap that scene by saying this: he talks about having a dream that felt very restricted. He felt very scared. He was in a dangerous situation inside of that dream. He was struggling. It seemed like everything inside of it just felt like misery and terror and hate. And all of that was working together against him, or at least he thought it was him until he looked down and he realized it wasn't him that was experiencing all of this. When he looked at the person who was in that place, it was actually Madame Morley, his wife.
Yeah. And so
mm-hmm.
when you said like the terminal disease thing, it seems like a natural reaction when he's like, oh, hey, I got something to tell you. But I, in hindsight, when I completed the scene, I feel like the problem that he's feeling, the things that, what's the urgent, the ominous situation is she's in peril. And he somehow knows it.
Absolutely. So that scene ends, and then we get back to Neha, and she's walking through the city, leaving as she goes through the streets, it seems like she might she gets the sense that she's being tailed, and then ultimately she rounds a corner into an alley, and it is revealed that it was one of the people from her old boss that Madame Morley had assassinated as a gig. Actually, a few people from that crew knows that Neha is back in town, and they're more or less trying to corner her so they can get their revenge, and that is where the book ends.
Yeah, it did end in a strange fashion for me. It felt like it was just an abrupt, almost like, you just stop reading halfway through. You know, that was a little bit abrasive for me, but you know, it's comics. The story is bite-sized chunks. And overall, I think this was more than 20 pages. One of the things you are getting out of Decorum in general is a meaty read. You don't just blast through these books in 10 minutes. Nalo, I had a conversation way back when Decorum 1 first came out, and I wasn't sure what to think of it, you know, because it was still the first issue. And he was like, you know, I'll tell you one thing, man. I spent like an hour with this book. I don't think he said it exactly in those words, but, you know, he was like, I just felt like I just spent so much time with it, like appreciating and diving into it, and then going back and looking at the specific panels and pages, and there's like little keys and cues with the art and different things. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because there's so much detail here. And, you know, it's one of those things that you go back and read it again and you pick up things that maybe you missed the first time. One thing I'm liking, I want to talk about the art here for a second as I rewind a few pages back into chapter 15. First of all, I just love these full painted illustrations that the artist does, whose name I can't recall off the top of my head, but we'll get to his name to credit him. Yeah, man, this ship just in orbit. I'm a big sci-fi geek, and I love stuff like this. You have a cool ship design in space, and you can evoke that world building to me and make me feel like I'm in this world a little bit and what it's like. And then going on this next page, you have a very innocuous panel here where it's just Neha and Madame Morley just sitting in their seats, you know, be the equivalent of sitting on an airline today, you know, and it's, but this panel is so much world building, and I really appreciate that. That's very important in a book of this type. If you're just telling a story that takes place in the real world, right? Say like Criminal, these type of scenes aren't as important because we are, as people, we live in the real world. We kind of understand what the world looks like. We don't live under rocks, hopefully. But we don't live in this world that Hickman is imagining. So it's very important that the artists have time to display it to us so we can say, hey, look, this is how things look. And I feel like sometimes a lot of lesser writers breeze right over that and forget how important that is, but not here. And indeed, you can look how the artist just, I mean, in the next page where we go back to the planet that we talked about, I don't know about you, somehow it reminds me of something you would have seen out of Firefly.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit of Western, a little bit of kind of Chinese tech. But that's just great. I just love seeing all of this. And, you know, I like how at first it was very jarring to me how the art style would change and then change and then change and change. I'm like, we can see here on this page, you get the nice typical kind of comic illustration, multicolored. Then you get some stark black and white silhouetted, you know, real quick, almost drawings where they're walking away. That's very much reminds me of a manga style thing to do. Then you go on the next page here, and a scene is broken up into multiple panels. The art style's changed once again, different colors. The use of color is to highlight specific, you know, parts of the page.
Right.
Then we go over the Madame Morley scene, and it's done what appears to just be all in pencil sketch or charcoals, maybe. And that I'm assuming it's to evoke a classical style, older. And then you get to the next part, back to Neha, and it's just real stark black and white line art with, you know, heavy inks, very manga style again, and then use of flat colors to highlight where your eye needs to be. And I know a lot of Western readers, if you're just used to just comics only, this can just be like, whoa, what the heck's going on here? But I think once you start getting used to it, you find like how well it helps tell the story that's there. Do you have any extra thoughts on that?
No, you nailed it. Yeah, we have the charcoal type stuff to evoke like a Victorian feeling for the Morleys when they're alone. And what's interesting, when Niha is alone, you get a little bit more of like a more modern day, either even maybe hyper modern, kind of color palettes and storytelling. And then when we go into the future or the galactic stuff, it's the most advanced art. Like you were talking about, like the space, how the spacecraft look, and its colors, how a lot of the gradients and whatnot kind of almost, almost kind of stretch out over each other to kind of give like that, primordial cosmic feeling. And I think it's really interesting talking about what things look like when it's just Niha versus what things look like when it's just Madame Morley and her side. Whenever they're together, it does feel like a mixture of those two things come together, where it's not as much charcoaly, but it's still like thick lines, black and whites are still prominent. But with Niha as well, at the very least, like you talked about, we get the flats for the most part, unless color really needs to be removed from the scene to evoke something else. But I think each area, each group of characters has its own artistic style, and then when they come together, you notice that those styles kind of overlap. Even when the Chiro's people and the robots, remember when they were coming together and they were talking to the sisterhood, literally sometimes half of the panel would be like colored and it'd be gradient and kind of flowing over into colors, and then the other part it would still be the robot people, but it would be in black and white, kind of like those worlds coming together. So the art does a lot of storytelling. I keep saying that, like in the chat, and it's weird, you really can't do it justice without seeing it and reading through the story and realizing some of those things.
For sure, for sure. Epidoxus says, I felt like I could hear the bustle of that city. Then there's a lot going on. And I totally agree. I really, really wish artists would, or at least writers. I don't know if it's the artist or the writer's fault. So whoever it is, the team, the creative team would devote more time in books of this nature. Like I said, not every book, if you're just telling a romance in a real world setting, you may not need to do that. But in a fantasy or a sci-fi, it's generally more important because you're in a world that doesn't exist. So you need to let the readers kind of see that world, right? It's like it's why we go when you take a tour, you go to another country or something, and you take a tour, like you go to Athens, let's say, and you take a tour to go see all the different highlights and tourist things that you see, because you want to see it. You've never seen it before. I think the creative team needs to think of it in that fashion, and here you get that, and I really appreciate it. This is a book that I think a lot of people are going to skip over because it looks so weird. I mean, you look at here, the I have up on the screen for Decorum 7, they show, the cover of what's coming up next. Things get commercial. And I think a lot of people are going to look at this and just be like, this is like some surreal weirdness. And the book, I got to tell you, once you get into it and start reading it and following the story, it's not nearly as surreal and weird as it looks. The first issue, it totally was, because I had no idea what was going on. But then as each issue went on more and more, you start to see a traditional story emerge. I imagine it was probably something was very similar when someone first watched Star Wars back in 1977. They had never seen anything like it. And they're like, what the heck? There's a walking carpet, like, I don't get the, and then once you see it, now Star Wars is so familiar to most of us. We're just like, oh yeah, whatever. Like lightsabers, Force. Okay, that's Darth Vader. Whatever. Like that's kind of how this book is. It starts off and you're like, I've never seen this, but he does such a good job just establishing the world. Now there are things that we still don't get. I still don't really understand what that sisterhood or the motherhood. The girls that protected the egg, the ladies, they were like thousands of years old.
I still don't really motherhood.
I still don't really understand what the egg is. It seems like
supposed to be the Messiah.
Yeah, it seems like that. It seems like it's a real egg, and inside is a person who's the Messiah. It does seem a little abstract to me still. Chiro Chi and his kind, still not 100% clear on what that is. It does seem like they're being not exposed, but sort of revealed as maybe an AI race. Because again, this is a big galaxy thing. This isn't just, you know, a couple of planets or whatever. The book establishes in the previous issues that there's a major galaxy and there's all these different races and things going on. Yeah. So where do you think this book is going?
Yep. I was gonna say it's about that time. A few things. One, I have a feeling if we're gonna go back to that Madame Morley scene and the dream that Master Morley had, I I think it's probably gonna be shown right that Madame Morley is going to be put in a position to where it's going to be her life or Niha's, and she's going to have to make that choice. And I think she might choose for Niha because she did get to pull herself. You know, it was alluded to that she lived a life of struggle as Niha did, and then she, you know, worked her way into the lap of luxury. Well, I think she, you know, her husband's older, and her, you know, having the ability to had tasted a better life. I think she might sacrifice her life for Niha, so Niha can get her family together and whatnot. Because that's one thing that seems like Madame Morley doesn't have outside of her husband. It doesn't seem like she has family, any other kids, or anybody going beyond them. We're not 100% sure, but there's not much that has been given in that way for us to think anything other than that. So that's one of the biggest things, I believe. And then the other thing, I got a feeling that the egg is going to end up in the hands of the wrong people. Just kind of knowing how Hickman does some of his storytelling, he doesn't always make it such an easy and clean getaway. So I think the egg is going to end up in the hands of the wrong people. But what I mean by that is I think the sisterhood is going to get it and procure it, but I think who they end up giving it to isn't going to be Chiro and his people. I think it's going to be I think they are going to get it and then ultimately give it back to the sisterhood or the motherhood, but I think the motherhood might be the bad people in the story.
That's interesting. Hadn't thought about that angle. I was thinking of a little bit along the lines of what you were saying. I do foresee a possibility where Madame Morley and Niha are in a predicament, particularly Niha, and Madame Morley has to make a choice that ends up costing her life to help Niha. I want to say that I predict a scene where Madame Morley has to break free from her rules and, you know, her manner, you know, how she kind of has that boxed in life. And like I was saying, I kind of feel like she admires the free spirit of Niha. And I want to say that she's going to be forced to kind of break free and do something that she normally wouldn't do because of Niha. And that will be a kind of a freeing moment for her, but then maybe ultimately cost her life. Although I don't think Niha, it could be the Niha's not safe either. I also, you know, this whole egg thing, it seems a little too straightforward. Like, oh, like Niha gets the egg, turns it in, gets all the money, and then saves her family. The end. Seems way too simple, cut and dry for a Hickman story. Seems more likely something like Niha gets the egg, figures out that if these whatever beings that Chiro was from gets a hold of it, it won't matter if she rescues her family. And then realizes like, oh, it's not that simple. You know, I can do this and get all the money and save my family, and then we're all turned into slaves to robots or who knows whatever is the consequences. Or maybe I have to forgo doing that and maybe not be able to save my family because the consequences are much worse. And I have a feeling it'll probably be a third something that I haven't even considered, knowing Hickman. But whatever it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be obvious. And but I do think it's going to be some hard choices. Man, I don't know. There's so much. I feel like we're just barely getting into the second act. in this story. I feel like that's where we're kind of getting into here. And I think things have got to get bad. I mean, kind of told the story of the sisterhood or the motherhood. I don't know, man. This is a really cool book. It's so different than anything that I'm reading. And each issue makes me more and more interested in it. The first issue, like I said, I admitted I was just like, okay, I'm interested. It entertained me to some fashion, but I left confused. Then the second issue, I was like, okay. By issue 4, I was like, ooh, okay. You know, we talked about that. I think that was the first issue we did on the show, was issue 4. And then 5 started getting really interesting. And then now this, I hope this book goes on for at least a couple dozen more issues. I don't know how long we have to go, but I feel like there's so much of this world to explore, and the motivations of whatever these robot people are, what the egg is.
Yeah, we got 2 more issues.
Is it only 2? I haven't heard of concrete.
Oh yeah, it ends at 8.
Oh,
yep.
see, I heard that was a rumor, so I was crossing my fingers.
Yeah, when the guy that runs the comic shop that I go to, my LCS, he was looking out at, because they could see farther out where to order, and it actually says, I mean, he couldn't order past 8, but it does say that it ends at 8. So we got 2 more. But hey, that's the great thing about this. Like, if they get a good enough response, if you guys hear it and think this story is interesting, you go support it. They could, get a bug in their ear and come up with a few more stories. And the next thing we know, hopefully by the end of the year, we get a little bit more Decorum. So I'm hoping so, because this thing is just packed full of like good stuff and a good time. Before we move on to segment 2, I wanted to read a little bit of the chat, because we got some people chatting about it. Maranya says that Decorum 7 cover has large echoes of Salvador Dali and the other surrealist artists of that time. And yeah, I do agree. You can see that's very surreal. Ash had made a comment about it as well, and it's definitely there. Dominic Powell says Dolly and the Surrealists would be proud to see their legacy be continued by artists who appreciate their craft, including the influence that they have on artists for generations to come. And yeah, that's always a great thing too. It means a lot. The art forms, progress based off of, what people have done, before them, be it popular or not, but like most things. But but what's nice about art is whether it's music or visual arts, movies, paintings and sequential art, and storytelling, they can pay homage to all of those different things in really unique and cool ways that not all mediums, or not all that things that progress can. So I think that's really cool. Ash, I'm aiming this one at you a little bit. Doug Johnson says the egg represents the meaning of life. The universe in this story is deeply nihilistic, and Niha is on her way to become one with it, but she still has a spark of divine purpose left in her life. I like that thought.
It's an interesting thought. I'm not sure I'm interpreting it that way. But I mean, the egg certainly could represent the meaning of life. The egg could represent just rebirth or birth itself. Niha feels like a character that's sort of just being born in some aspects, certainly reborn.
Right.
She didn't really have a purpose before. She was just kind of getting by, doing odd jobs, and she got sucked into this life, and now ultimately her path is going to cross. It seems like her path is going to cross this big cosmic egg, which has been incubating for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to produce some sort of messiah that's supposed to, I don't know, affect that somehow I'm going to call them the robot people. The robot people don't want, or they're trying to control. There is a lot of Matrix parallels in this book. Specifically like the Matrix sequels, in relation where like Neo, in its connection to the machines and the God machine, that ultimately at the end of the trilogy he merges with the God Machine at the end. I
Right.
feel like this egg thing, whatever the Messiah thing in the egg, represents a similar type thing. Like, I feel like these robots might be a vast AI that have taken over most of the galaxy. And this is the only thing that stands in their way of other thing. You know, I don't know. It's weird. It's almost like if you were like to tell the story of the Matrix from like a side character's perspective and not actually even deal with the main thing, because it's almost like there's a bigger picture thing going on, and then there's like Neha's story, and she's gonna just sort of run across it at some point. That's what it feels like.
Indeed.
So Doug says a phoenix egg. No, it's not a phoenix egg. It's nothing. I mean, it could be, I guess, but it's nothing there's nothing alluding to that in the book. It does feel like it's this prophetic thing. It feels a lot like the Kwisatz Haderach too. If you read Dune, the whole story of the Kwisatz Haderach and reuniting the universe and things like that. There feels like some parallels there as well. Certainly, Jonathan Hickman is a well-read person. He actually reminds me when I read his books. I'm a huge Wachowskis. You can't call them the Wachowski brothers anymore. I got to be careful. I'm a huge Wachowskis fan. I think they read lots of books on philosophy and ancient history and things like that, and so they get some really metaphysical, weird, philosophical storylines. And Hickman, I feel, does a very similar thing in his books. And it's part of what I love. So I love seeing all of this. I can't wait. If there's only 2 more issues, that means the plot's going to round up pretty quick here. I'm interpreting what I'm reading probably wrong. There's probably a much more right around the corner type of thing about to happen. So we'll be here probably in about a month, whenever issue 8 or 7 comes out, to talk about that one. And we'll cover all the issues. So grab these books. It's not a hard story to collect. I recommend it. If anything that we've been talking about sounds interesting to you, these books are worth it, in my opinion. But let's get into, because we got another even bigger book to discuss. So let's get into East versus West. Or no, East of West. Not East versus.
Yeah.
East of West.
East of West. Yeah. What can I say? Another set where definitely, if you didn't feel the hook before, it's in now, and they've kind of pulled in a little deeper into the story, and things are really, 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 really coming around. Volume 4, Ash.
Volume 4. This one was a little bit shorter. It's only 4 issues versus the 5 issues of the other volumes, but still packed with lots of stuff. I will say the first thing that stuck out to me of these books, or of this volume, I should say, is the themes that it starts off with right in the beginning. And that is hate and war. That's what stuck out to me. Primarily, I feel. Wait, did I pull up the wrong?
No, you got it. It just starts off with the world issue.
Oh, the world issue. Okay, because I read the actual floppies, so
okay, gotcha.
I just read 16 through. Give me a second here, because I did not read this world issue.
Yep, it starts at 41, page 41,
and it's hanging for me. Of course, that's what Comixology loves to do on the browser. 41. Let's see if it. There we go. Thank you, buddy.
There we go.
So, the overall theme so far of the series, or at least one of the themes of the series, is hate. Maybe I'm misreading something because, again, I don't have the whole picture yet. But I feel like every volume so far has included hate, and in particular, what hate causes people to do, how it motivates you. and how it drives us down the wrong path. And then in this one, it felt like the first, at least in the first volume, you know, here we get to see Conquest drinking blood of, there's this huge battlefield and just everywhere the eye can see, just skulls and blood. And, you know, they're just reveling in it. They're like, oh yeah, and they're just drinking the blood. And, you know, of course they're the horsemen, so they're evil. it's part of what they do. And then we get these flashback scenes, and you can always tell with the flashback scenes because there's a little bit of a desaturation of the colors here. So you know that this is like, hey, this is what happened in the past. And really, I thought this was just a cool scene. I remember talking about the world building and just seeing the world and environment. So it's 2065, Apocalypse Year 2. So that's important too. The first 3 volumes we read was Year 1. It's now into Year 2. And we get this scene where it's like a single great machine of the endless nation appeared in the sky above the Texas Republic in the second year of the end times. An accountant was demanded. Governor Bell Solomon would answer for his cold-blooded murder of an endless shaman, or the endless nation would offer answers of their own. And it talks about how the Republic stood up and the last of the Rangers got together and they took down the machine and they're like, yeah. You know, and then it's like 2 days later, the endless nation blacked out the sun of their also endless great machine of death. This was the coming of war, the likes of which man had not seen since the schism itself. And you're just like, oh, damn. Because they talk about like how hard it was to bring down this one death machine. But these Rangers, they did it. And then it's just like, you see this like endless fleet of them. And you're like, oh, my God. What can stand against that? And, of course, nothing. And then the Endless Nation, these machines, they all stack on top of each other and form these totems to remind the people that they were conquered. And it's really very atmospheric. Then we get to this scene where they're giant gallows and they just hung the last of the Texas Rangers. And they got Bell Solomon on the gallows, and we see one of the shamans of the Endless Nation, and he's shouting to the people, and he's basically, you know, telling them this is a reminder that you're conquered, we're going to start a new nation, blah, 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 blah. And Bell Solomon, because he caused, you know, the death of one of ours, you know, this justice is being served, et cetera, et cetera. And then we see the little dog, the robot dog that, if you're like me, you love. And he's pooping out some little ball thing.
Love that dog.
I thought that was really cool. And you're like, what's going on? He's like, woof. I'm just walking through the crowd. And then where there's that dog is his master. And
Ranger Thomas. And
the last ranger wasn't killed because there's an unaccounted one. And we know how good of a shot he is from previous books. And he's got his sight over on Bell Solomon. And then the shaman is talking about how, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he's giving his speech. And just as he pulls the lever and Solomon drops, shoots the rope. And we see Solomon drop clean underneath. And then the dog runs in, shoots out his little grappling thing, rescues him. And it's a really cool action sequence. Like, I was like, man, this is a book that needs to be adapted by HBO or someone like that and told in a long form TV show form. I would, can you imagine if they just did like a 5-season thing of this, or even a 3-season, 1 season per year, you know, like this, this scene was so great. The dogs are yanking him and the robots are firing. And then all the little balls that he pooped out, they started going off, and they're making a smoke screen. And he brings them back to the Ranger, and they make their getaway. And you're like, wow, what a great opening. There's a lot of details that go on with the Mao meeting with the Endless Nation, a bunch of political alliances and scheming, etc. We see Bell talking with the Ranger, and Bell, you know, he's kind of corrupted. He's got this evil voice talking into his ear. And so that makes an interesting situation. We don't ever know if we can trust Bell. Is he going to be able to resist, you know, this voice?
Yep, Cheveo.
Chevelle, yeah. And, the Ranger's just like, dude, I need your help. And, talking to him. And we don't know. Meanwhile, let's see. We come over to Archibald, who's now president of the Confederacy. And we get introduced to this woman who basically has replaced him in his old position. We get some dialogue between them that's kind of interesting. But not super pertinent to the overall plot. If you read the books with us, then you know what happened. Just for the sake of time, and we'll kind of get through. There's a lot. I love how this book. I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, huge fan, and one of the things I love is like all the different nations sort of and their own agendas, and the characters within them kind of working for those agendas, and then other characters, like how those agendas conflict, and sometimes they work together, but then sometimes they're scheming, and then there's all this, and then even within the nations, there's people scheming because people are trying to take the thrones of their own. And here we get that too with John Freeman, and
one of my favorite scenes in the whole book.
This is a great scene, and there's his younger brother, John Freeman 9. He keeps showing off. And he's like, look at how good I am, blah, blah, blah. And he's and he keeps goading him. He's like, yeah, if you're so good, why don't you show me? And of course, we get a show-off scene. And you're right, this was a great scene. And this is one of the scenes, again, that made me think, like, how awesome. I want to see this. Like, I would love to see a show, like a high-quality show, like Game of Thrones quality, because this scene was so cinematic, where he pulls in his girl, like, and he's shooting, he's kind of shooting the targets because he's proving like how good he is, but he's also like dancing with her at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, as good as these panels are rendered and my mind can sort of imagine it, I just would love to see it in fluid, full choreograph, full motion choreographed. I think this would look awesome. Yes. And then we get to one of my favorite characters here, Babylon. And I look at this face. I love the mask that he wears, because he wears like a virtual, like a VR mask, so he doesn't actually see the real world. But I love the design that Nick Dragotta did here, where the exterior looks like eyeballs. It almost looks like something dripping out of his eyes if you kind of just glance at it real quickly. And it makes for a very eerie visage, which I think enhances what he is and what he's supposed to be. And again, he doesn't see the real world. He sees the world as Balloon, his little robot floating orb that's tethered to him, shows him. And his whole world has been something that he's been brought up to believe. Like, he's been programmed essentially since birth. He's had this AI tutor tell him everything. And his whole understanding of the world is what this thing has taught him. And I find this absolutely fascinating because from my own personal worldview, I very much hold this like philosophy that guides me through life, that I kind of came up with, which goes, how do you know when you're being deceived? And there's really not an answer to that, because once you know you're being deceived, you're no longer being deceived. So you can't really know you're being, if you are being deceived, you can't know it. In a sense. And that's just one of those things that I'm constantly thinking about, because we're all deceived all the time in various ways. Sometimes some of us see the truth of one thing, but a falsehood of another, and vice versa. Skip may see the truth of that other thing, but not the thing that a falsehood of what maybe. And so we're constantly often finding ourselves at odds with one another, because our worldviews aren't the same. We get misinformed. Sometimes we're just ignorant about things. Who knows? Well, this kid, to me, is a very fascinating exploration of what it's like to have a completely misinformed view of the world, but yet you still go through the world thinking you know what you're supposed to do and what you need to do. And I should do this. And you're still making decisions, right? But you shouldn't be, because you're clueless, but you don't know that you're clueless. And I think a lot of you probably know someone who might fit that description, or at least you think they do. And so you might be frustrated and go, oh man, if they only knew the truth. And then those people might think that about you. And it's just all around us in the world. And this kid kind of is a metaphorical example, like a hyper example of this condition. Anyways, I spent a long time on this. He comes across, what's his, Ezra?
Ezra, yep.
And well, we'll get back to what he sees there. Death, meanwhile, has been reunited with his long lost love. I just call her Mao. She is essentially now the Mao. And this is an interesting sequence. Last we left, she was super pissed and said, you know, she didn't love him anymore, and she'd go find our son. And so he had a purpose, and he failed. I mean, he found their son sort of where he was, but he wasn't there. So he comes back and explains to her, and basically explains, like, look, I found where he was, but he wasn't there anymore. He's gone. And she's like, well, why did you come back then? You're supposed to come back with him. And he's like, I wanted you to know that he's out there and he's free. And he makes a really interesting statement to her that I thought was, where is it? Is I wanted you to know he's free. She responds, he is lost. He's finding his own way. And when he finally figures that out, you know what he's going to find waiting for him? And she looks to him, what? And Death responds, us. And I just thought that was a really cool scene. And then obviously that was very important for her as she grabs his hand. And a really weird, touching kind of moment between two characters that should be kind of despicable. But it's you know, they make a connection and they find their love once more. There's an interesting scene where the guys outside there are wrestling, you know, see Madame Mao like just naked. And like, whoa, that's our lead, you know. And I thought it was interesting, the crows, because, you know, crow's a girl, so the crow goes and tears the binds or whatever and closes them, so give them some privacy, as because everyone's just like gawking. It was a funny scene.
Yeah, that was good.
But we go back to Balloon and Babylon, and, you know, look, it's interesting. This is what Balloon looks like to Babylon. He actually looks like a balloon with a little emoji face, I guess the best way to say it. And there's this whole little adventure. They're going through the forest and they're getting away, and that's when they realize some beast is stalking them, but it's Ezra. And this is how Babylon sees Ezra. He is the prophet Orion. And I'm very pleased to see you again, he says. And then the beast looks like this giant hamster thing. Of course, looks so cute. And I just love like how the deception, the wool is literally pulled over his eyes. And then the white page here says, I am the oracle of the times. Watch me laugh, hear me lie. And that's one of the themes going on, you know, with Babylon. It's just his whole world is a lie. We are all so blind. Won't someone show us the way? And there's these moments that Hickman just throws in these little white pages that you think like, what is this? But they're really relevant, and they're usually relevant after. You read it and go, I don't know what that means. But then you go back after you've read it and go, oh, I see where this is going. So the three horsemen have grown up. We get a flashback scene. Oh no, this is wait, this is confusing. So they're shown old right here. Is this before they died and were reborn?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So this is what they look like, not as kids. When they die, they're reborn and they have to go through the growth process. So here's where they're giving the boy to Ezra, and you get to see like how this all happened, and they plug him into the machine, and hardwire him and basically start programming the apocalypse, which I thought was very interesting. It feels like this whole apocalypse for humanity is programmed. Like
some of it.
I feel like, it's hard to grasp. I'm reading the story and like what's happening, I'm understanding, but the bigger picture feels very elusive, if that makes sense to me. Now, I know once I read the whole thing and I go back and read it again, probably going to be much more versed like yourself. But this, I got to be honest, I was struggling, like I said, with the bigger picture, not with the story itself of what I was reading. I did really enjoy this scene here where he's like playing with the beast, which looks like, of course, this monstrosity, but he's doing a jump rope thing in this one scene, and it's just like it's played off to be like, yeah, look, it's a little innocent kid in a giant hamster, but in reality, it's not. Very interesting juxtaposition, I thought.
Definitely.
We get a scene with Death and Mao having to part ways, and he gives her a trinket that she can use to call for him, and he'll hear it wherever. And there's a really cool, the second page here that I have up on the screen I thought was really cool. I guess both pages. He gives her a kiss and she says, "I'm sorry I was so angry." He responds, "Sorry I gave you cause." "Then don't do it again. Hurry back to me." "You have my word, Lady Mao. The only thing that could keep me away is me." Which I thought was very foreshadowing. I was like, because, who he is death. So the only thing that can keep him away is death, is what he's saying. Obviously, hopefully you all got it. And I was like, oh man, that's so foreboding. But it was so powerful of a scene. And then again, we go back to the boy, and it's like the beautiful, look at, like, he's always in these like picture perfect vistas, right? And then his reality of the world is like just messed up, apocalypse, so we go through what I ultimately think is one of the big parts of this book is teaching Babylon, the boy is named Babylon, is teaching him about killing and why we kill. And in accordance to the book, the author talks, there's 3 reasons to kill. First, you kill to eat, then you kill to survive, and then the balloon ultimately teaches the boy, then you kill the things that will one day kill you. And so, at first he can't kill the little squirrel, so the balloon does it for him. But then the balloon triggers these beasts to come and attack him to force the boy to defend himself. And ultimately the boy does, and it's a big action sequence, and he just kills them all with his spear. And the balloon tells him he's proud of him and stuff. And then this is when he gives him the 3rd point. You're going to have to kill the thing that'll one day kill you. And you hear the rustling in the bushes, oink, 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 oink. And you get this cool scene here where the 2nd page, and he sees, it's a little baby pig, and it's all, of course, it's cute and everything. And the balloon says, "So you know what you have to do?" "Yes." "Do you know what you're going to do?" "Yes, I do." "Then do it." Oink, oink. And at this point, I was like, oh, shit. And you don't get to see. You're like, no, what happens? Because I don't know about you, anyone in the audience, I'm thinking if you're gonna kill the thing that's gonna one day kill you, you need to kill Balloon. That's my first thought. I don't know what's gonna happen though because Hickman keeps me hanging, but I loved it. That's how the book went. Wes, did I miss anything? Did I not say something important that was in this story that needs to be pointed out?
No. You pretty much touched on, majority of the things that are, very apparent. One thing I will say, based off of something that you mentioned, the lady that came in that talked to Archibald, that is his niece.
Oh yeah, that's
And
right. She's family.
yep.
There was two,
Yeah,
and she
exactly.
had two brothers.
Right.
And that whole scene that I kind of glossed over because it's a good scene. It reads well and it was fun. But I felt like in just summarizing the story to tell you what that scene was about would have it's a side thing.
Oh yeah.
So
We're
I
up
didn't want
against
to
the
I didn't
clock
want to really
on, yeah.
detail it, but yeah, basically her brothers are idiots and she's smart. And Archibald, there was a really cool line in there where it was like, you're not trying to start. She called her basically. She equated her brothers to kindling for starting a fire, and said something like, "You're not trying to start fires, so you don't need kindling. You're trying to play chess."
Yep.
Hinting that she's like smart, and that's why. And I was like, "Oh, that's a really cool scene." Like, but for the whole broader picture, it wasn't a big deal. But you're right. This whole book, guys, if you're not reading this with us, what are you doing?
It's such a good book. It's such a good book. And this is one of those things. I mean, obviously I'm not gonna spoil anything for anyone, but this is one of those seeds that Hickman plants. The seed will sprout. That's all I'll say about that.
I love
Um,
that.
but along with that, I really liked the end chapter, or the last panel in that part where what's inside of that box says tricking planning, that's her game. Can you trust she maintain? And Archibald says, I believe in God, good cigars, and strong liquor. Who are these fools that still believe in people? It's just like, oh man, I just love how much, how like well nailed down like Archibald is in this story. Of course, I mean, and this came out before Knives Out, but I get Knives Out of
Uh-huh.
vibes from the character that Daniel Craig played inside of the movie. That, the silver
Yep.
tongued
Yeah.
devil. I love those characters. Madame Morley has a little bit of that as well. She's silver tongued, but like her sting is apparent where, talking about deception and deceit as Ash was, Archibald's is always concealed, always concealed. He's always sly and slick. And I like that he is in this story. It does very well for the character that he plays, and plays a role for his character, as his character continues to grow and go through the storyline. I'll say that. But no, I mean, everything else, man, you really nailed. In this story, we got to see, the veil was pulled back a little bit more, and we got to this. I would say was probably the most personal of the most personal volume out of all of them. We got very personal moments with everybody. We got the moment earlier on with John Freeman, where the vizier for the king, his father, who is also his girlfriend,
Right.
is pressing him, basically, hey, the king wants to know why you're so invested in this deal, like you put them in debt to have them in debt to us, so we basically own the nation, buy yourself a nation, as they said. But she was like, but that much debt, like that, like why was that necessary? And through his dancing shootout, where he shot down the whole target practice facility. He shot down all the targets. he was letting her know, like, this, it's important to me because this was my deal. I arranged it, I put it together, I executed it. That's why it's important. So it's a very personal thing to him, where he is a prince, next in line to be a king, and he has everything that could be acquired, material wise. But the thing that makes, so what does he want for? That's almost, the king is almost asking via his vizier, what do you want for? Why is this so precious to you when you own everything, you can have anything? And he was like, this is precious because this is mine. I didn't, there were resources to me that, and whatnot. And yeah, I've got a name to it, but I orchestrated this. So that was personal. Obviously, it was a very personal story with Babylon, him at this point, originally the programming that they were giving through Balloon. And I really loved how when they read out, when Ezra, called Balloon to him to update Balloon with the new directive, how when he called out what the programming was, it had 666 inside of it. So, like those little details.
There's so much depth and detail in these books. I mean, I try to blast through when I do the synopsis because, it's a full trade. Like, I don't want to spend an hour going over it. I'm in hopes as everyone has read it, but that synopsis is kind of important for the people who haven't, to feel like they can be a part of the conversation too. But there is, honestly, man, if you guys aren't reading this, it's not, I'm only giving you like the Cliff's Notes. Every page of this book, there's things in there. And this is one of those few books that I read where I'm like, I'm almost already looking forward to reading it again, because I know I'm not grasping all of it. I know that I'm like, okay, I'm getting enough to enjoy it. It's fun. But I know when I read it again, things are just going to come in a little bit more clear. I'm going to understand when a character is introduced into a scene. I'm going to be like, hey, I know who this guy is. I know he's, and when they have interactions, I'm going, oh, I know where this is going. There's a lot of things right now where I'm reading and I'm like, okay, that happened. Not sure why, but it's cool. This book is chock full of characters. So many. This is why I was saying I would love to see this done as like an HBO show, like of like either, I would say maybe not Games of Thrones or Westworld quality, because not just because I want to see the visuals, I do, especially like that dance sequence would be so awesome to see it choreographed and done, but also because these characters are so great. And when you just did the voice, when you just did the Knives Out thing and you captured that accent really well, by the way, I was like, yes, that's another, I want get some great character actors behind these characters like Archibald and get to see their scenes played out with really great acting. This would be a show for the ages. I know you could say that about any comic that you like, make it a show, but honestly, I think this might be more than any other book I've read where I'd just be like, this would be amazing to see done as a show. RDV says, I haven't read the books that you guys are talking about, but I'm excited to read more Firepower. Well, we'll be reading Firepower on the next episode. Should be. I believe it'll be coming out. But you guys, this is wrapping up the show. If you have any comments about anything we've talked about tonight, these books, please throw them in. Skip, any other thoughts on East of West? Are you still with us? Did we lose Skip? No. All right. Well, looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Skip. I'm not sure what happened there, but we'll just cover their. I'll just cover the solo. Skip, if you can hear me, probably rejoin the room.
You should be able to hear me now.
There we go. There's our boy back. I was panicking. I was like, I wasn't prepared to go solo. Uh,
Nah, that was my fault. I just hit a little button on my audio software. But no, primary thing is, you hit it. There's themes. It's a very very personal story. Themes of hate, themes, especially earlier on, themes of humanity and versus our civility. What our civility, what we're trying to achieve. With being more understanding, using more reason and logic and whatnot versus us clashing against our baser instincts, and when our backs are up against the wall, or when you know catastrophe happens, how sometimes we kind of revert back to more primal ways. That is exactly what the three horsemen were talking about at the very beginning of the book. And then of course we have the theme of trust. Can someone be trusted to go through Cheveo yelling in Bell Solomon's ear as Thomas Ranger is relying on him to, show him where the rest of the chosen are so he can finish the job that Bell sought him out, to finish, which is taking out the chosen. And then of course we have a little bit of a reconciliation with Mao, her heart being so stony because she was raised to be a warrior, and then she met death and it softened, and right as she opened herself up and had a child and everything, she was vulnerable, and then bam, catastrophe strikes and her family is separated, and she goes back to having a heart of stone, also hands of steel, if you will. So you got reconciliation with them having that tender moment. And it says in the book, they won't come back together. So the last time that they get to see each other, there was some reconciliation and some healing. And then, of course, we talked about John Freeman and his brothers. This is personal to him. So he wants to see this deal through because this deal has his name written all over it. And then lastly, it's just with Babylon. Ezra went through something, in that last meeting of the Chosen where, Cheveo basically set Bell up to end up killing up one of the shaman. Because remember, the shaman kicked Cheveo out of the Endless Nation, but the reason that they kicked him out is apparent now. He was using their technology to give to the Chosen without them knowing, to create the beast along with Ezra and Archibald. So the can't that whole his whole thing is kind of completely blown out of the water, yeah, at this point. So he's out of it. And everybody's story, like I said, is very personal, even coming down to Ezra changing the programming, since he's feels like he's a little bit of an outcast now, and now letting Babylon decide, like, hey, Balloon, I'm going to update your AI. Now we're going to push Babylon, we're going to put him in situations that are high stress, and instead of forcing him to be the beast, we'll see if he ends up becoming the beast, or what he wants to be, something else. So that's where we're at now, and I think it's just really cool that as much world building and everything as we've gotten, Hickman took a moment to make things personal again, because now that the world is built and all the characters are in place, this is year 2. Now things are going to start to shift around, and it's going to be very, very, it's going to be a great ride for me, Ash, and all you guys listening and hopefully reading with us, to see what those changes are and how they affect the players on the board.
Well said, man. Hey, RDV in chat asks a question. He says, how far east of west are they? I know he meant that in jest, but that actually brings me up a question. Does the book ever explain the title East of West?
Yes, yeah, it actually did in the previous volume. It came out of some of the some of the message. The particular part was like, it was talking about death and Mao, born of the East, daughter of the West, it was in that part. So it was actually part of the message that got built out in volume 3.
One of those things I missed that I'll catch on the replay. All right. Well, guys, that's bringing up the end of the show. I'm very much enjoying this book. And, I say the same things over and over again, but I don't think it can be said enough about indie comic books. They get overlooked so much because this industry has been built on the backs of the big two giants. And that's just the way of things. I love, that's where my initial love of comics comes from. is Marvel and DC. I love superhero capes, and that's all great. But I'm telling you, these books, these indie books, they're a step above, and it's sad. I really wish that my favorite mainstream books were this good, but this is a celebration of at least that we do have other books that are. And while I'm busy, maybe, having my favorite mainstream book being canceled over at the big two, these books get a full run. I get to know that I'm going to sit down and read East of West, and I'm going to get to see it through to the end. And that's exciting to me. I hope you guys are convinced. If not, we're going to keep trying to convince you until the end. Pick these books up. They're fantastic. So next 2 weeks from today, we're going to be covering, assuming it comes out on time, which it should be, we'll be covering Firepower number 7. Interesting that both these books are on the same number. Also, a big indie guy that I'm discovering, my boy Skip is, again, ahead of me on this. Ed Brubaker had a new book that recently came out called Reckless. Skip has already started reading it. I have not yet cracked it open, but I'm very much looking forward to it. Everything that I've read by Brubaker is great. Anyways, we're going to be doing at some point, we don't have established time, Skip and I need to get together and maybe have another guest. We could do a show on Reckless. So if you're interested, which you should be, go get the book now. You can find it at your local comic book store. You can find it probably at bookstores. I think it gets a bookstore release on December 22nd.
I think that's right.
So if you're not seeing it at bookstores or Amazon or whatever, I think it's the 22nd it comes out for that, which is nice to get the comic book stores get a little bit of a lead time to try to sell the books. I appreciate that. I recommend it. I think it's like 5 or 6 comic books worth of material in the book. So it's a $24.95 MSRP, but if you divide that up to $4 a comic book, it roughly comes out about the same. It's beautiful hardcover. And like I said, everything I've read, you guys have seen me on other shows I've read through, my story time. I've read through some, recently on my 100th episode, read through Brubaker's story. Pulp is the best book I've read all year. I recommend checking it out and joining us when Skip and I get around to doing the show on it, so we can all sit around and geek out about it. And Skip, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to say before we said goodnight to all the fine comic fans in the audience?
No, just we appreciate you guys always being here, being active in chat, as well as, engaging with us in the Discord and whatnot. Sometimes we talk later over in the Discord. So just, continue to tune in. And, after the fact, if you have to, I know people are in different time zones, but, we really appreciate you guys coming and building it with us, because as Ash said, it's always more enjoyable when we've got a larger group to share it with and talk about it. And so keep showing up, y'all. It means a lot.
All right, fantastic. And I will be on Discord after the show. Skip's invited if you have time. Anyone else that wants to come, you're all invited. Hang out, continue this discussion. And to everyone else, thanks for joining us, and